All right, all planning board members got the voice on? You can hear?
Yes, sir.
Yeah,
Okay. Any announcements under open session?
Done.
No, okay, good. First thing on the agenda is the AADU discussion. Where we left it last week was the discussion I had with town council, with researching Title V, discussions with building inspector, and it seems we have a problem that we weren't aware of with the definitions of new construction, and therefore all septic systems have to be brought up to date with no variances in order to get an additional dwelling unit on the property. Unless you got town water. And that cuts out an awful lot of majority of the houses in Wellfleet. So I
But that
left
may
it,
change.
I'm sorry?
That may change. As more water becomes available, that may change. Yes? More
well,
town water becomes
Well-
available, that may change.
Yes, Beth, to answer your question directly, that may change. However, you would have to put new water lines in, and depending on where you put them, right now, most of them are in real tight areas like downtown, Taylor Hill, where we have water problems and we have a lot of small lots. So trying to, we got the 95 Lawrence Road project at least moving forward, but that line on Cole's Neck still has to be updated, and that whole 9 yards, and we were able to do it because of that.
No,
I
I
don't
get
think-
that. I get that.
Yeah, and I think if areas were added in the future, like Brewster, Eastham, for example, decided to go with the whole town, we can think about zoning changes if whatever we do at that moment in time. So what I did is I left,
So the reason I asked the question is,
okay,
could we think about it in terms of what is, but also in terms of what could be? So that we write a policy, if we write a policy, that includes thinking in the future as to what's possible. So that any place that has X, Y, and Z could access this policy. That's why I asked the question. To make
too many variables.
it, flexible.
well,
Just a question.
no,
A lot of variables to that question.
I get that. We'd have to identify the variables, identify them, and say a district, a property that meets these criteria is then eligible. We'd have to identify all of that.
you can't, well, okay, under zoning, you can't make something ineligible. The only thing you can do is make it not in that zone. So you can't, unless you do an overlay district, the residential area is the town of Wellfleet.
So I get, so that's the limitation. I was trying to get away from that and extend it to any zone that meets the following criteria could
It's
apply.
pretty vague and open-ended that,
Well-
that it's all subject to change. So it's like,
Just
Okay.
trying to make it work.
Yes. I think we've,
It might not be
It's throwing a
possible to do
curveball.
it that way.
I'm sorry?
I get that it may not be possible to do that.
Well, okay, I mean, it is possible. If you have town water,
Yes. Number
Okay.
one,
number one, it's possible. Well, it's more than possible. Well, it's possible, I'm sorry. It's possible. However, you now have the problem where, unlike Eastham, where they went in and they took the entire town of Eastham and went with water. And everybody had to hook up. Therefore, the entire town of Eastham is on water. So you no longer have, except maybe a well to feed irrigation, you no longer have any holdouts from anyone not wanting to join the water system. So if you were to say, you're going to allow an ADU, I'm just going to pick the residential area in the town of Wellfleet, just for discussion. If you were to allow ADUs in the residential area in the town of Wellfleet, subject to Title V, you basically would be streamlining that use to any property that may be on town water and probably has, you have to take a given that most houses are 3 bedrooms. Therefore, because of this, if they want to go to a 4th bedroom, they have to have an acre of land. Those are 2 caveats.
right?
What makes it difficult on the town water side is town water has been supplied to most of the areas that have very small lots with high density uses. So your separation between well and septic is minimal. And because it's not mandatory to go to town water, you could have a section, I'm just going to take an example. You could have a section of part of Taylor Hill is town water. Not every house there is on town water. I mean, is on town water. Not every house is on town water, even though town water goes by it. And those individuals that choose to hook up, their next door neighbor may not. So that individual now has town water, but just because they have town water would not probably allow them to put in an accessory dwelling because they would have to bring it up to, if they've got 3 bedrooms now and they want to add another one that's 4, they'd have to bring it up to Title V, but they would have to stay away from their neighbor's well because there's still wells in the area. And because all those lots are very small, it would be extremely difficult, if at all possible.
No,
Now-
I get that. I get that.
Okay. So the only other
Well,
area
that's
you could do it,
that's why it makes it difficult to even go down that road and just like move on.
It makes it very difficult to do it, but it makes it possible if you meet all the criteria to do it. which
okay.
most
I don't think
people
you can
will
get all
never
the
meet
variables.
those criteria.
What was that, Beth?
I say most properties will never be able to do it. But
Well, okay, and then, all right. Let's just take those on town water, for example, right now, before we reach the next area. Because those lots, and I guess this is myself speaking on this issue right now, on this particular situation. Because those lots are on town water, they may or may not be able to do an accessory dwelling unit. But now we look at lot coverage. Most of those lots are probably 10, 12, 15, 20,000 square feet, 15% lot area coverage for dwellings, garages, sheds. So therefore, on a 20,000 square foot lot, if you've got a garage and you've got a house and you want to do 1,000 square foot unit, you're never going to meet your coverage ability because you don't have it and you're not going to get a variance.
No, so
Yeah.
Jerry,
Yep.
that's
I see you all got.
that's the second criteria. You
What's-
have
Yeah,
to
and there's
have
probably
footage.
100. That's the point.
No, I
What's the-
get it. I'm just saying, we're narrowing it down to the finite possibility of people who could do this. Because you have to meet
No.
criteria A, B, C, and D, and E, and F to be able to do it. And maybe one person can do it.
Yes.
I get that.
Okay. Yep.
So isn't it good if one person can do it? Under all the conditions we set, does that not pay off if somebody
No.
can make it work? So who's saying no? I hear Dave. Is that you?
I'm saying no. That's a rabbit hole you'll never get the answers to.
Explain it to
Because you'll
me.
never run all the possibilities of how you can not do it or do it. So it's way premature to write it predicated on the availability of town water. When that day comes, then we can address it. Short of that, you're just spinning your wheels.
So I think I understand what you're saying because I'm an educator and I say you cannot create all the rules the kids won't follow. They're going to find the loophole, the place that they can misbehave because you don't have a rule for that. I
You
get
don't
that.
have all the information available. Yeah,
I get that, but water is not the only thing. Water is the first thing.
correct.
But then there's
Water is
all
not
these
the only thing.
there's all these other requirements about footage,
Yeah.
acreage.
On small lots. You get an acre lot, of course, that's not as much of a, it's not anywhere near as much of a problem.
And that's where it's going to happen. It's going to happen on lots that are more than an acre because who else is going to do that, right?
Well, in my mind, and I'm certainly, I see Olga wants to jump in and so does David B. Fox, but in my mind, those individuals that have small lots who have houses on them aren't likely to want to go through that kind of investment of $200 minimum a square foot to build 1,000 square foot house of $200,000. It just doesn't make sense to try and do it for minimal usage.
Right.
You get into the 40,000 square foot lot, and yes, that makes a better situation. You don't have many of those on town water, so now you've got the septic and well situation, but a lot of those,
So they won't be applicable.
well, no,
We're
they would,
saying
they would-
town water.
they would be applicable under the umbrella of being able to do Title V. So there's no criteria. All the criteria is you got to bring the system up to Title V. So they would have the ability to bring it up to Title V on an acre if they had 3 bedrooms and wanted to do it. A lot of those are in, a lot of the ones that were formed into acre lots were in subdivisions that basically have restricted it to single family. The
They
next
can't do it.
problem you run into is, okay, there was some stats out there that we had a good size, we had a good number of lots over an acre.
But a
But
lot
that-
of them are restricted. Yes.
A lot of them are restricted.
So if they're restricted, they can't do it.
Right, but they're also,
Correct.
they're also in a situation where that I look at is, say, we did the cluster zoning bylaw just a little while ago for affordable units on 60,000 square feet or more. So we're talking about 1 acre, but if you all of a sudden have 30,000 square feet, 60,000 square feet, which is 20,000 square foot more, you've got the ability to do a unit, not worry about renting it. You can build a unit, walk in and sell it. Now, you could sell it affordable, but you all of a sudden are taking something that's costing you $200,000 or more to build. If you've got 60,000 square feet, why would you do it if it's costing you that amount of money when you just can rent it? Whereas you could turn around, spend that $200,000 or $250 and sell it as an individual unit for $450,000. It doesn't
Makes
equate as
sense.
to feasibility.
No. I get that people are gonna do what works best for them. They're gonna do
Yes.
how they can make the most money.
Yes.
I agree with that completely.
Some,
However,
not all. There will be some that will,
there will be some that won't. However, that's not our job. Our job is to make it possible. No, I'm as negative about this. I get all the limitations, all the nastiness of people, all the selfishness of people. I get that, but the planning board's job, in terms of if we pass a policy, is to make it possible for someone to do it the right way.
Beth,
it's also.
I mean, I know I'm cutting the other two off.
Go ahead.
Beth-
Oh, wait a minute, Alfred, but
David's been waiting.
Go ahead.
Olga's been
get it.
waiting.
Olga?
I'm waiting.
I can't see
Everyone's
through my
waiting.
phone.
Sorry, I'll shut up.
But, Olga,
I agree with Beth that I think the appetite is there to have a bylaw that allows it to happen. If it is only 10 houses, if it's only 6 houses, that's 6 more units. So that's all I want to say. That is what Beth is saying, I believe. If it's possible, let's make it possible. Let's make it permitted.
David Mead?
Yeah, I agree with that as well. And I in particular suggest that we take a look at the second paragraph of the February 12th letter that Sharon and Elaine sent to the planning board, which gets us beyond the issue of town water. And they're basically saying, I think, the same thing, that there will be some number of legally created ADUs that are possible because they are either already Title V or they've become Title V. We're never going to be talking about large numbers. But to lay out what these are the rules, this is what's possible, this is what you have to do if you want to have an ADU, leaves open the possibility that even a handful of people do it, and that's better than we have now. That's all.
Well said.
Okay. I see it, Bonnie. Alfred?
The pointer is first. Go ahead.
All right, Bonnie?
Yeah, so I'm sorry, I could not get in to the meeting for a full 10 minutes. So I'm sorry I'm late. I missed the first part of the discussion.
We didn't start.
It
We didn't start
started
until
late.
just about 10 minutes after 7.
Yeah, right. But then
So you only missed about a minute.
good. Okay. I am agreeing with Beth, Olga, David, that we should have a bylaw. The discussion I've heard so far concentrates on what seems to me probably a fairly rare instance of somebody building a completely new building. It seems to me that the most frequent opportunity for this will be some elderly resident with a house that's too big who wants to create like an apartment for a live-in person who may or may not be a caretaker, but it would be somebody sharing the house. So it would be somebody in, she might refinish a basement or repurpose part of the house so that there's a separate kitchen for the other person. It doesn't have to be an increase in the footprint of the house. It might even not be an increase in the number of bedrooms. So I'm wondering why people are saying that this is going to be so infrequent. But I also agree with what the other people said, which is that even if it only allows 10 of these to happen, that's 10 new rental units. And from what I understand, that these 10 units would have the restriction on them that they have to be for year-round rentals and not for Airbnb units, which is
Well,
another good thing.
it's a good thing. It's a good thing. But we're going to come back. Alfred, you want to jump in before I start again?
Well, I've listened to Beth, and I agree with Beth, because there may be one or two or three of these things out there if we do this. I mean, why don't we just let the affordable accessory come back, and if there's 6 more of them, you've got the same thing, and the tenants aren't paying all the money. I mean, we're trying to create something which I agree with in part. But, I mean, if you take the time and look at all the stuff on Taylor Hill, that every other house on Taylor Hill that has water, 5 around them don't, so it's not as if they have the water, okay? And the other houses can't get it because it's not on their street, even though they abut each other. So, I mean, are we really going to get that many out of this? I mean, I really think that the Housing Authority should be working at trying to do the affordable accessories. That's my opinion. That's all I have to say.
Well, come back to Bonnie's question. Bonnie, it doesn't matter whether it's a separate dwelling or whether it's a dwelling that's built within the house. The minute a use and occupancy permit has to be issued, you're triggering the new Title V definition of new construction.
Yes, I understand that.
So consequently, most of those large houses on small lots that have 5-bedroom or 4 bedrooms on 20,000 square feet, taking a bedroom and making it an apartment isn't going to do anything because you have to bring it up to Title V. They can't do it. They simply can't do it. So, that's
Jerry, can I comment to that?
We've got a dilemma now where if this continues, the way I've read it, as I said, the council and everybody else has read it, we've now got 15, 17 units out there
That are illegal.
AADUs that are absolutely, positively illegal.
Absolutely, I agree.
That we got a mess on our hands.
Yes.
And this doesn't cure the problem of all the illegal. So if we've got 16 or 17 ADUs that are illegal now, 2 times. One, because half of them or a third of them aren't even renting anymore under the ADU. And number 2, because their septic systems were never upgraded and can't be upgraded. Then we're looking at all the 50, 60 or so units that are totally illegal that could never. So we're continuing, in my mind, to add a mess to what we've got, and we can't clear up our problem to begin with.
So Jerry, I see.
And add on to that issue is yes, let's say somebody that's got an acre lot builds a $200,000 house, apartment, rents it to a tenant on a year-round basis for 1 or 2 years, and then all of a sudden says, you know what? I'm tired of this. I'm tired of collecting rents. I'm tired of somebody in my backyard. I'm going to pull out the stove. I'm already legal now because I've upgraded my septic system. So the bedroom or 2 bedrooms that I put into that unit are totally legal. My bathroom's totally legal. My kitchen area is totally legal, except I got to pull out a stove, and I'm going to rent it for 10 weeks at $2,500 a week, make twice as much money, and I only have to put up with somebody for 10 weeks of the year, end of conversation. And that is perfectly legal.
You're so right.
Absolutely
You're
legal.
so right.
And I don't think that's, in my mind, the way I want to push Wellfleet. Because it's being done with
No.
the AADUs, it's going to be done with this, and we got B&Bs all over this town that I just think we got to get a handle on this stuff instead of continuing to open the door. I
So-
know we need a,
I totally
know.
agree with you, Jerry. I totally agree with you. My question to you is there no way zoning and planning can make it tight enough so that can't happen?
no,
No,
Why not?
no.
because you can't.
Because that's what will happen. I know, I'm a realist. I know that's what's gonna happen.
It's
I've
perfectly
seen it
legal.
over and over.
Yeah, it's perfectly legal, and I hate, except for the Title V, okay? And I hate saying this on the air, but I'll say it anyway. Those individuals that got a special permit for an AADU and have backed out of the program, I think there's maybe 4 or 5 or 6 of them. They've backed out of the
6.
program. They fell off the face of the earth. I am sure those people have not stopped renting. They've built up, they've either changed part of their residence in their house and added an apartment, went to some extent, or they built, turned the garage into an apartment, and probably are renting with a full kitchen, either on a summer basis or winter and summer, or turned it into a B&B. If a particular neighbor, and Paul's told me, building inspector, he's had to go out to a couple units in town. He didn't say whether they were AADUs. He's already had to go out to a couple units. The bedrooms are legal, even though they weren't. But as it stands now, they were legal. They weren't legal, but they're there. He can he can tell him to take the kitchen out. I'm sorry. He can tell him to take the stove out of the kitchen.
Mhm.
The dishwasher, the microwave, the sink.
The
and
coffee maker.
$1,000 Weber grill on the deck that any summer person wants to cook on, because that's all they want to do. They don't want to cook in the house. They're fine. So they are still, I'm going to assume, I'm going to take a giant step and assume that the Title V is okay. I'm just going to assume that. Based on that, they're still legal. So they've changed it from an accessory dwelling unit or an AADU to a quick summer B&B or a
Weekend, whatever.
weekend,
Yeah.
whatever, or a summer rental. And there is nothing, to my knowledge, that we could do about that. Now, we can get our tax money off the top, but we can't stop it. And I don't think, with all the things that, again, I'll come back, I'm just having some serious problems with it. I really think, from a zoning point of view, when we did the cluster zoning and we gave 1 unit, you do an affordable and you get an extra unit, maybe we got to go and look at that a little bit more and say, we want to sweeten the pie. We'll give you something else if it's a rental. I don't know, but I do know that when you have a town that is mostly well and septic, these kind of problems rear their heads continually.
Jerry, Kathleen Bacon has her hand raised.
Oh, I didn't see Kathleen. Okay, and I think I'm
Well,
also
that's what you
looking
have
at
me for.
Mike DeVasco. Kathleen,
Yes.
I think she's probably on mute and she's trying to get back on.
No, I'm here. Good
Okay.
evening, Mr. Chair. How are you?
I'm okay, Kathleen.
Good,
Thank you
good.
for asking.
You know, I know there's been a lot of effort on Olga's part and our housing authority with regard to this draft and a change in this bylaw. And I've been following it from the very beginning. And I have to agree with you, Mr. Chair. I see it as being very problematic, you know, for the very reasons that you're stating. I also agree with Alfred. I think we really should be looking at the accessory dwelling and what we can squeak or tweak or work on there. But I will tell you, in a conversation I've had with our rock star health agent, Hillary, with regard to 95 Lawrence Road, she has made mention a number of times that the state is going to be changing and creating much, much stricter standards for Title V. She sees that coming down the road sooner rather than later. So having said that, you know, it really is a game changer for anybody that wants to try and invest in creating one of these units. But you know, I'm all ears for whatever can be possible. I agree with Ms. Singer that, you know, if there's a possibility, we need to find a way. Thank you so much for the time.
Thank you, Kathy. Mike?
Unmute, Mike.
Mike, you're muted.
Okay.
There you go.
Hey, so I just have a couple points to make, really. One is that, you know, it doesn't seem like the health agent or the Board of Health was consulted, nor was there a written request for town council on the subject of new construction. And I've spoken to the health agent as well as an attorney about the interpretation of new construction. And I have gotten different readings on that. And, you know, when it refers to new construction, there's a couple, they're referring to two separate things. One is construction of a new building for which an occupancy permit is required, or an actual increase in design flow. An accessory building does not require an occupancy permit.
It does.
Therefore,
Sorry,
It does.
An
Yeah,
accessory
get over it.
accessory building.
Accessory building that you put a living quarters in requires a building permit, an occupancy permit.
In order to convert it, it does. Yes.
No, even a building.
If you put up a garage, it doesn't require a occupancy permit.
No,
As
that's
a-
correct.
as a garage.
Occupied.
Oh,
That's,
right.
it's not a residence.
So that's
Not
not,
a residence.
so once you have a garage, that's no longer a new building. The definition says new building. The
You
second thing,
convert the garage, excuse me, you convert the garage to a single family dwelling. That is going to require the building inspector to go in and you issue a use and occupancy
Occupancy
permit.
permit.
That triggers,
sure,
that triggers it. So
I
it's
understand that, but
not apples and oranges, Mike.
it does say
Yeah.
the construction of a new building for which an occupancy permit is required. So the new
No,
building.
no, I'm sorry, Mike, it doesn't.
It says that, right?
You're
here.
wrong.
There's no, I've talked to town council on it. I've talked to the building inspector on it.
I'm just
I've
reading it
talked
right
to
here.
a
from
number of
Title
building
V.
inspectors on it. And even if you do it within the house, you're not building a new house, you're changing the layout within the house. You have to get a use and occupancy permit when you have a residence.
Sure.
And
A dwelling,
therefore,
you're
you have
adding
to
one.
Bring that septic system up to Title V.
I understand what you're saying, but the actual reading, the way this reads, and I've talked to an attorney and I've talked to the health agent, and both agreed here that the first provision in new construction is of a new building for which an occupancy permit is required. The second provision in construction is in regard to replacement or repair of a building in existence as of March 31st, 1995, that has been totally or partially destroyed or demolished,
They're exempt.
right?
They're exempt.
Everything beyond that point refers back to that provision of new construction. Everything that's said beyond,
You're
replacement,
reading it
repair of-
wrong, Mike. I hate to tell
All
you
right,
that.
Mike,
You're reading it wrong.
Town
First of all-
council didn't agree with you. I'm sorry.
well, I understand they have a verbal opinion from town council. I'm just saying that this probably should have gone to the Board of Health, who permitted these. The last
Well,
I checked, the planning board is not the permitting agency for Title V, and Title V has nothing to do with zoning. So really, the issue is here, whether the planning board should be basing their bylaw or potential bylaw on something that they don't have the authority to permit or to to even interpret, really. Interpreting Title V is the job of the Board of Health and the health agent. So
It's also the planning board's job to look at, when we pass the zoning bylaw, are we passing something that is contrary to Board of Health regulations?
well, if the Board of Health, that's what I'm saying, you guys didn't bring it to Board of Health. The Board of Health didn't say, yes, this is how new construction is defined according to the Board of Health. And if you don't agree, then we should, as the policy of the town is to write a written request to the select board and the town administrator to get a legal opinion. That's the process for which legal opinions are got by town council, not verbal opinions from town council on, and all due respect to the chair's request or verbal questioning. So I just want to bring that out there. I don't think it's settled. I don't think that the Board of Health agrees with this construction, with the definition of new construction. The health agent did not agree when I talked to her about that. And also, I've spoke to an attorney who deals with septic issues, and they did not agree that the interpretation that you guys are using for new construction is applicable. So I just think that it should really be brought through the process to the people who actually permit Title V septic before you can determine that these restrictions would apply across town. If somebody what we're talking about here is the ability in zoning to add a second stove into a dwelling. So if you have a walkout basement, you're saying that adding that stove creates new construction. What I'm saying here is, in this provision, everything that talks about increasing dwelling units refers only back to properties that are in that have been totally or partially destroyed or demolished, provided there's no increased design flow. And if you read it, that's what it says. So I'm going to leave it at that.
Mike, you're not dealing with building code on that regard, because building code would dictate that's a new dwelling. And not only does it need the proper means of egress, it needs fire separation. So it's not just putting up curtains in the basement. There's far more to it than that.
Sure.
That's why we're exploring all the options.
Well, I understand, but if we're basing it on Title V septic, it should really go to the Board of Health, is my opinion.
Okay. I personally disagree with you. Town council disagrees with you. David Rao, who worked in Provincetown, disagrees with you.
I
Our
disagree.
building inspector disagrees with you. But I don't want to get into a contest with the Board of Health. That is something that if the planning board wants chair to go to the Board of Health on and ask what the situation is, and have town council put it in writing, which I already have, but it's not in writing as in, from that point of view, it's simply texts back and forth. We can get that as well. But right now, it is pointing to a serious problem that we have in Wellfleet, and it seems apparent that it's wrong. But I disagree with you also, Mike, that when we planning board looks at zoning bylaws, we look to everything within the town. And if we have a problem, which seems we had a problem in the past, not to compound it. So that's that. I'm sorry, who else? Who else was up?
I don't have anyone with their hand raised.
Okay, so where do board members want to go based on this right now? You've seen a letter from Sharon or from the affordable housing people that if we don't proceed or give them a nod that we're going to seek additional information and continue on in that regard. They want to get something on town meeting floor. They're considering a petition bylaw, which I've given them as much help as I can as to how to do it. And if they feel that they can get it through, more power to them. It becomes their problem. But I don't know what the planning board members at this point want to do.
Well, it seems if they're going to propose one, we shouldn't have a conflicting one. So it's one or the other. I mean, I'm more than willing to go forward, but there are a lot of complications, and I'm certainly going to not be held to an arbitrary date of town meeting this spring. Maybe it's possible in the fall, but we already have a lot of issues. I'll remind you, for those who have read the bylaw or read the zoning book, and I would hope that other board members have read the zoning book at least once, because there's 8 other sections that need to be changed in order to pass this proposed bylaw.
Yeah.
Yeah. So read the book and find those sections, okay? Because we have a lot of work to do if we're going to do this. But it's not going to happen by spring because we're in a hurry. Because we'll just make more of a mess out of it. It's not impossible, but you can't just put a date, yeah, we're going to be ready. There's a lot of things that have to change in order for this to pass, in order to be not conflicting with our current zoning bylaws.
So David, if something goes forward at town meeting and gets approved without us,
Yep. Yeah.
it probably won't meet that standard.
Correct. I can almost guarantee it,
And
like
then-
Willie Joe
and then-
Namath in the 3rd Super Bowl.
And then what's the implication for us going forward?
You,
Is that we have to identify all the problems and try to surmount them or change them. We've come to an obstacle with Title V. Well, maybe we can work around that, and maybe it is just for the bigger lots. But as I said, there's 8 other sections in the bylaw that need to be addressed. It's not just coming up with a rainbows and unicorns ADU. There's other things that we do need to change and address. Because right now, we're still in conflict with our ADU bylaw in respect to the zoning book.
So I agree with you. My question is, are we more efficient responding to a bylaw that gets passed without us, in which we are reactive, or are we more efficient passing our own bylaw in which we are proactive, paying attention to those things?
I would agree with the latter there, yeah.
Which position does the planning board want to be in? That's my question.
wow, Beth.
Because we're going to be in one or the other. They've made that clear.
Yeah, well, they
Well,
want to get it
yeah,
done by spring, and it ain't happening, so.
Well, maybe we can
It's not-
negotiate something with a longer term to get it right.
It's
I would like that.
David's point. Obviously, if the affordable housing or anyone, I just won't lay it on their shoulders, anyone submits a petitioned article for the warrant. Most of the time on the petition articles, and I mean this no offense to any of you that may write that or take advantage of it. Most of the time when a petition article is placed, it has a lot more serious problems than when the planning board does it and submits a petition, an article. We have an overview of the entire zoning bylaws and we try and catch things. We try. Most of the petitioned articles are kind of done, again, with all due respect, they're done with some blinders as far as this is what the petitioner is looking for and is not looking at the overall aspect of the Wellfleet zoning bylaws. Consequently, a zoning bylaw gets on the books and it comes back to haunt us because now we have conflicting problems, serious problems. So now, Beth, to answer your question the best I can, if a petitioned article for, just to make it simple for me, an ADU were submitted to the town clerk with sufficient signatures, it would then go to the selectmen. And they would then forward it to the planning board. Planning board would hold a advertised hearing.
Okay.
What we do at that hearing is to vote yes or no as to any recommendation. Yes, no, or no recommendation, sorry, on town meeting floor. We as a planning board have absolutely zero ability to make any changes in that petitioned article. It's, here it is. You either approve it, you don't approve it, or take no action. So if it's full of, if it has a single problem, it has a lot of problems, it doesn't matter. We can't adjust to it. If the planning board does it, to David's point, one of the things we try and do is tear it apart. And we've got good members on this board that can tear it apart. And other members that can try and put it back together again. But we play the devil's advocate. We play to what can happen, to what other zoning bylaws do we have that contradict what's going on. Hopefully we catch them. In reading this particular problem, I didn't want to jump into, as an individual, Board of Health problems, not my bailiwick. But what brought up the problem to follow it is, okay, we've got a serious problem with enforcement, and that kind of led to everything, because how do we can't enforce what we got, how do we proceed? So in reading zoning bylaws recently over again, when you think you know them all after 25 years, you find out you don't know them that well. You need to brush up.
Yeah.
I have found, to David's point, a number of conflicting problems in our zoning bylaw that concern me seriously outside of Board of Health with accessory dwellings. AADUs even be allowed in the town of Wellfleet through other zoning. We're in the process, finally, after I think 3 years planning, of codification. where our zoning bylaws, our general bylaws, all of our bylaws in the town of Wellfleet, general, charter, everything, goes to a codification company. They read it through. They do it for all kinds of towns and cities all over the country. And they come back and say, okay, you capitalize here and you don't do it here. You call one thing this and you call the other one that. You
Yeah.
say you can't do it in
Consistency.
this paragraph, but you can do it in that paragraph. And they straighten it out. We have to then go back to the town of Wellfleet town meeting and say, okay, codification is complete. Here are the list of problems that we've got to correct in wording, capitals, everything, and straighten it out. That's a long situation.
when that's gonna be
Emphasizing what David said is simply there are conflicting problems in multifamily dwellings within the town of Wellfleet in our zoning bylaws that make whether we pass it or somebody else passes a petitioned article without cleaning up all of those things. We don't have time to do that between now and town meeting.
Jerry, do you know when that process you described is going to be completed?
No, I don't. I think Mike, and we have Mike DeVasco here, and Helen's still here. We started when Joe was here. It kind of got put on hold a little bit because Joe was leaving and then Dan was leaving. Got put back on when Mike Travato came back in as assistant town administrator. It's been started, but now with our new TA, and I hopefully, I haven't heard anything yet, but hopefully with a new assistant TA, that will be spurred on and done fairly quickly.
Jerry?
Yes, David.
Yeah, I can comment a little. I'd like to comment on that. P-Town's gone through that, and having had to enforce their laws, particularly because we have to go into historic as well, there's very few that are in conflict. Wellfleet, just in respect to this bylaw, I found 8, if not 11, that are in conflict. And that's just in regards to this bylaw, not other laws that we have regarding other things. So the codification process is important because we already have kind of a mess.
I gotta agree
I'll
with you,
say
David.
that from having worked in P-Town.
David Meat Fox, I wish I could give you a better answer. As I said, you've got Mike and Helen here. I know it's in the works. I know probably when the new assistant TA is appointed, that will be a priority. I'm not sure where the codification company is. I know they're on board. When the codification company does get us up to speed, we could take this particular ADU bylaw. We could send a request off to the codification company because they do so many towns and say, what towns in Massachusetts have ADU bylaws, and please forward it to them. And with a click of a switch, we have all that information.
Yeah.
So by getting this together, and this is what Assistant Town Planner Joe was thinking, with Dan was thinking, this is really a major step forward for Wellfleet to codify all of our laws. We will have to renumber all of our zoning bylaws.
Kind of like Route 6?
Yep, everything like that, but it will be a step forward. Now, to get back to the point, yes. To have somebody bring in the article by petition, they may only have more people that they can reach out to say, okay, fine, we can pass it. But when it gets passed, without seriously looking at all of the other problems, we have a mess on our hands. And I don't see those things being able to be clarified prior to town meeting. And I really don't think, and I'll go out on a step here, basically, because the planning board has received Sharon's Ag's letter, that I don't think they're prepared and even thought of having to go into the Wellfleet zoning bylaws. They're concerned with the ADU bylaws simply. I don't think they were looking to all of a sudden take on the town of Wellfleet zoning bylaws to straighten them all out. So the bylaw that they write makes sense and is in fact enforceable. So those are the kind of problems that we're wrestling with right now. And you can see that we have a different opinion with Mike. I did reach out to Hillary and tell her that we were looking at with this, and she said, okay, whatever you do, you do. And that was a discussion we had. So she knew darn well that planning board was looking at this. So it involves a lot of people and a lot of work. And we all know we have an enforcing problem with all the units we have at the present time without adding more. But this all comes back to one thing. The planning board and myself are not against affordable housing. We've passed 3 zoning bylaws that are trying to get more zoning opened up for affordability. We're not against it, but you do have laws in the state of Massachusetts that we have to follow, and you've got to find a way around it when you're a small town with serious problems with town water and town sewage. So, you know, and everybody's concerned with that. Beth, did I answer your question with all of that? I'm sorry.
Well, yes, I totally agree with you, Jerry. Our heart is in the right place. It just seems to be insurmountable to make it applicable to the community. I keep struggling to figure out how to do that, but I get what you're saying completely. I know all the obstacles. And but so there's 2 things.
Mhm.
There's the reality of what we do and don't do. And there's the perception of us based on what we do and don't do.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I don't care about that.
Oh, but the
There is a
town
perception.
cares about that.
There is a perception.
Jerry,
Yes.
Michael DeVasto has his hand up, as does Kathleen Bacon.
Oh, God, I'm staring right at him and I don't see a hand up.
It's
Which
in the
one has
left-hand
first?
corner of their screen. Michael's first and then Kathleen.
Okay,
You really
Michael.
can't see their hand over there?
I can't even see Kathleen.
I see part of Kathleen, but I see Michael. Yes, Michael.
Just to play the devil's advocate here, I'm just wondering if the petitioned article, has that been brought to the planning board and shown to the planning board?
No. I'm assuming, David, and I say no. What the planning board has been working with Sharon, Elaine, with affordable housing on this particular bylaw. We without going on too long, we looked at, should we join the ADU up with the ADU? Make it one special permit where the applicant can decide whether they want to be an AADU or an ADU. One, they have to watch how much they charge, the other they don't. Sometimes AADUs, tenants make too much money and all of a sudden, you know, either they got to get out or they fudge the records. So we were thinking they could swap. I've talked to town council on it. Town council felt it was a very interesting thought process. She had not run across it in any other town, but she said, Jerry, I think we could make it work. So I have a suspicion that the affordable housing, but Elaine and Sharon, just to just name the 2, because that's who I'm most familiar with here that we've been dealing with, is they've written some stuff that they've brought to us. I have a feeling, Michael, that they probably will parallel some of that information, but the planning board has been on a difference of opinion if we were ever going to do this before we found out the problems with
Sure.
Title V is whether it was a special permit or by right.
Yeah, I guess this is
So
the
that's
question.
still hanging out there.
This is the second half of my question here is, so if there's already conflicting bylaw issues with the AADU bylaw that need to get cleaned up, that haven't been cleaned up for, that law has been in practice for how many years? 5 or
20.
6?
Almost 20
20.
years, 20
20
years.
years.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so we've got those conflicting issues. That bylaw was drafted and drawn up by the planning board. So if a law were to pass at town meeting that was petitioned, one would assume that if it were similar enough, or that if this were brought to the planning board and could be pointed out what the conflicts would be outside of what already needs to be fixed, that there is just a certain amount of conflicting bylaw issues that are already in play when it comes to accessory dwelling units, AADUs, that would also apply to these. So I guess I'm sort of playing the devil's advocate in here and saying, like, is this really a reason why you can't move forward when you already have one on the book that's been on the book for 20 years with conflicting bylaws that need to get cleaned up, that's in practice? So say this passes, I mean, you still have to deal with the same things no matter what with the pre-existing AADU. That's my point on that bit of the process there. If that makes sense. Like,
Well, it's like just saying the car's broken, let's just beat it to death. You know?
well, you're
I-
assuming that there's
yeah.
new conflicting bylaw, like new conflicts, when if this parallels AADU, which I assume that it probably would. I've seen a draft bylaw that it pretty much parallels that with some differences in permitting and affordability requirements. Other than that, it parallels this other bylaw. So you're not adding necessarily any conflicts to the zoning bylaws.
Yeah, it's a stretch. We became recently aware of a lot of the conflicts, I think, as Jerry has said. We didn't propose them when this was passed some 20 years ago, knowing of the conflicts. A lot of these have just come to light in some of the recent zoning decisions and going back and looking into addressing AADU. We started to look back at this stuff and go, oh man, there's a lot of holes here. So the revelations that we've had problems are fairly new. So to compound those by adding a new one, that seems rather foolish.
I'm not sure that's David's take. I'm not sure, Michael, that the ADU is really somewhat of a different animal. I mean, there is no income. Thresholds. It's wide open, whatever the market will bear. The only really caveat is, and restriction from what I can see, is that it be rented on a year-round basis and that simply you notify the town of Wellfleet. I'm assuming that it would be assistant town administrator. Let's just say, for example, it is that the owner would notify the town administrator, assistant town administrator, at a yearly date that they have a year-round tenant. End of conversation. Whereas with the AADU, a lot more filing, a lot more income, a lot more restrictions involved in that, and what the rent is charged. If we go on the premise of the septic, they both have, of course, the same exact problem. It's possible, quite honestly, that if the affordable housing feels that they want to keep it as simple as possible, and not mess with AADU and leave that in the planning board's lap to clean up any problems. They could simply extrapolate some paragraphs from our bylaw that seem to work and come up with a petitioned article.
Kathleen still has her hand up, Jerry.
Yeah,
I got it.
One quick point is just that, we have an affordable housing crisis. We also have a housing crisis. There's actually zero inventory. I know 3 families right now that are losing their housing, that don't meet the criteria for affordable housing. They don't make enough money to purchase at the median house price. 2 of them are shellfish families. They can't actually leave the town borders. One of them lives in a 400 square foot in-law apartment with no stove, just a hot plate and a mini fridge. So this is the reality of what's going on in town. And so I just want to point out that the rental prices, and I lived in I don't know if it was legal, maybe grandfathered in cottage. My rent was not under a capital A affordable. It was $850 a month. Now that's below the affordable rental rates in the town that are set by the state. So the market rate and the actual affordable housing, capital A affordable housing rates are not that different. My friends pay $900, utilities included, not affordable housing. Now they don't have a stove. Maybe they could get another $100 a month for a stove, but that's what we're sort of looking at here on the ground, where there's people in my demographic that they want to stay in this town and raise their families, but honestly, it's nearly impossible. If you lose your rental right now with a median house price, well, I think it's $679 now or something around there, and absolutely no inventory to rent. You have situations where people are in people's unfinished basements with kids, which I know that's happening too, without kitchens. And that's just life right now, trying to live in Wellfleet. And there's a certain sort of stigma that's attached to applying for affordable housing also. If you're somebody who's young and in the workforce and don't want to be income restricted, it's a difficult thing to sort of walk this boundary of, as a couple, we can only make this much money, or we can't certify and stay in this house. I mean, these are issues that are compounded. So it sounds nice to just say, let's just keep working this AADU thing. But the reality is it hasn't added much inventory. We have affordable housing projects going on. There's funding for affordable housing. There's absolutely no lever to pull for what we call workforce housing, which I prefer to call it attainable housing, but it's dubbed workforce housing basically. And so that's why this is such an important issue to me. I see it around me every day. I'm not in a demographic where there's, the people my age and that have young families are secure or were able to buy houses when the market was attainable, and you could buy a piece of property for $30,000. Those days are long over, and the building costs are high. So if this can be the relief valve to sort of keep 5, 6 families in town, I mean, that's a big deal. And that's the only point I want to make. I promise I won't talk again.
No, that's fine. Mike, we've discussed that. I've used a couple of those because I know a couple of them. I brought it up at the meeting. And that's why I said before that the planning board is not saying we're not in favor of affordable housing. It's a matter of how do you do it. But with as you said today, with the cost of construction, just to build 800 or 1,000 square feet, you're throwing your 900 out the door. These rents are going to be in the 14, 15, 1,600 when you don't have a buffer on it. They're not going after, and they're not going to care about when it costs you $200,000 to build 1,000 square foot. If you can do it,
you can't.
$800.
Jerry, it's 300 a square foot.
Yeah, it's free.
Yeah.
If you have an in-law apartment, quote unquote, with no stove in it, how much does it cost you to put a stove in it? $500.
Well, number one, you don't have an apartment if you don't have a stove. All it is
sure a separate space where somebody housed their grandparents at one point, or whatever it is, kitchenette. to convert that into a living space is very inexpensive. So,
Yeah, it's case to case, Mike, on that. You really
I'm
can't.
not saying everything applies equally. Just saying there's walkout
Yeah.
basements, there's illegal dwelling units right now that could be able to come into code.
There's sheds.
What was
There's
that? Beth?
sheds being made into housing units. Sheds.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Yeah.
those presumably wouldn't qualify.
Yeah.
But there are units that are there right now, and most towns who have passed these ADU bylaws have a amnesty to bring those into compliance. Now, everything's sort of hinging on the interpretation of new construction, but Brewster has these ADUs. They have found them to be compliant on well systems. So I'm not sold. I disagree fundamentally on the interpretation of new construction. I'll reiterate that, and then that's it. You won't hear from me again in this meeting, I think.
Nope, no problem. By the way, I talked to the building inspector in Brewster on this already.
Yeah.
So I'm ahead of you, quite frankly, Mike.
Okay.
Kathy Bacon.
yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, for everybody that's listening tonight, I'm living the Wellfleet dream. I'm in an illegal rental without a stove. And guess what? It's affordable. I took this situation 5 years ago out of a desperate need of not finding anything else to live. And yes, Beth, I had been living in a tool shed in someone's backyard for about 3 months with a dog and a cat. True story. I found
Nice.
this place and no stove. You know, you don't even want to know. But I thought it was August, and I said, if I can do this for 4 or 5 weeks, maybe I'll find something else. I'm 5 years in. What they're
Wow.
living in Truro in the motel is better than what I'm in right now. But that's not the point I want to make. Mr. Chair, I want to ask you a hypothetical question. The last time we did a zoning bylaw change was in the year 2007. And it was a petitioned article. It went through the planning board. The planning board had their own version and the citizens had another version. This was with regard to large house build out in the Cape Cod National Seashore.
Yep.
The question I'm asking you, Mr. Chair, if a petitioned article were to go forward and pass at town meeting, knowing that we have all these holes and problems with our zoning, in particular, this one particular bylaw is chock full of holes. So a petition article passes a town meeting. Does it get signed off at the Attorney General? What are our chances of it having being signed off on the Attorney General?
They don't codify it, I don't think. They will look at it as a standalone, but they won't meld it with other bylaws. That's just the extent of their review. I do believe, correct me, Jerry, but
Yeah,
they'll look at it standalone.
Kathleen, when we, let's just take that 2007 petitioned article that got passed on town meeting floor.
Well, I was holding my breath while that was up at the State House.
Yes. What they do, it's sort of, it's just like when we passed a zoning bylaw against franchise businesses.
Right.
It went to that and that petitioned article. One was by the planning board and one was by petition. It doesn't matter whether it's petitioned or by the planning board. What happens is it goes up, and you're absolutely right. I mean, when it goes up, the planning board still holds their breath. They make sure when it gets kicked up there, most of the time when planning board does it, town council has already made a phone call
Right.
to the Attorney General's office because that's why we pay them the big bucks, to say, okay, I got a town that's thinking about doing this. How do I stand? They'll turn around and say, okay, A, B, and C, just watch your step. We don't guarantee anything, but at least that's a step in the right direction. They come back, they tell us, and we still hold our breath. The long and short is it, to David's point, they don't look at, let's take the 2007 petition. They don't look at anything else in Wellfleet zoning that might contradict that petitioned article.
Okay.
They look at the context of the petitioned article to make sure that it's consistent with what they have passed in the future or in the past. What they also do at the end of the paragraph in saying that we will stamp your article, your zoning article, they put a disclaimer at the bottom, notwithstanding
Right.
that you may have a problem with, ownership. You may have a problem with this. We're not giving you a fait accompli and saying, just because we passed it, you're home free. That's your
No.
problem if you get sued. We're just letting you know. They may come back and say, no, this is totally and absolutely illegal. We're not going to sign off on it. Seldom do
The
any.
condominium law is an example, Jerry. That's a classic example. We passed it, it got approved by Attorney General, and then it got shot down later.
Yeah, and so consequently, they send it back and say, all right, here are your problems. And just like they passed the franchise one, and they said, you got a problem with consistency and ownership. And as soon as it was brought to court, it got overturned, and we had to withdraw it because you can't zone against ownership. So whether or not it's a petitioned article or whether or not it's sent up by the planning board, to answer your question directly, they don't look at any other problems we may have on the zoning in the town of Wellfleet. They simply look at that article. The
Standalone.
codification, on the other hand, when we get that done, will all of a sudden look at everything. They'll look at
Right.
all
That'll be
you might have.
that's a game changer.
Kathleen?
Yes, thank you. Thank you.
Okay.
Jerry, you have Helen Miranda Wilson's hand up, and then Sharon Ruleger is up.
Where'd Helen go? I saw her picture, but where'd she go?
She's there. She went up. What she does is she puts her blue piece of paper over when
Oh,
she's
there
not
she-
talking.
Okay, there she is. Hi, Helen. Helen.
Helen, you're
unmute
muted.
yourself. There you go.
Hi,
Yeah,
the
yeah,
public
thank
doesn't
you.
need to suffer. Here's what I want to say. And I've had to think about it. So Olga, who may or may not continue to work with us, Sharon and Elaine and I are working on a draft for a petitioned article. And I am their secret weapon because I used to be on the planning board. And David Rowell, through you, Jerry, I am fully aware of all the sections in the zoning bylaw that would be tinged or directly affected by this, right? So the draft that we are then going to work on together, and then I'm going to show to a couple of very
Sure.
qualified lawyers, will probably have, respectfully to other petitioners, better language than most petitioned articles. Most of the time when people, Jerry's right, when people petition articles, they don't vet them rigorously. But I have some of the skill set, given that I also work with other people. And why don't you wait and see how you feel about it? Jerry, may I just highlight a word you used a couple of times, the way people do, you too. You kept describing the planning board approving something that was a petitioned article that came before you. You can't approve it. Vote to recommend it or not.
That's what I said.
Yeah, no, you kept using the word approved. So
No,
you
we have
can't.
three. We have three options.
We get that all approval is a
Come on,
recommendation.
Still talking. And this is going to happen before the petitioned article deadline, which is 60 days before June 5th. And I think it's going to be good enough for the town, for people in the town to take a good look at. It's going to be a by right ADU, and there are going to be pros and cons discussed, and it may or may not work, but I am coming out of the closet with this because it won't happen willy-nilly. It will happen in a very focused, careful way, with me working with Olga, if she can, and Sharon, and Elaine, and some attorneys, and taking input from other people. So I just wanted to give you a heads up about that. I thought about not telling you anything about it, but that seemed disingenuous. So that's all I know now. And you guys will get to see a draft, right? But you don't have to work on it. It's going to happen. Thank you.
You drift, Helen, sometimes, I don't know what it is, but sometimes you drift in and out. So I got most of what you said. I did get, or the planning board got an entire copy of Sharon's letter to the planning board, letting us know in the last paragraph that probably that was the direction they're going. As far as that aspect, I've always welcomed, whether I was a member or a chair, if somebody, and I've told them how to do it. I mean, if somebody wants to petition an article, they have every right to do so. I feel, quite frankly, and I'm sure other members, but I go back a long way with you, I have confidence that at least with you involved in it, there will be I's dotted and T's crossed that most people would not do. So I'm confident that you will have some people looking at it. The planning board only has 3 options, either to recommend, not recommend, or no recommendation. So those are the only 3 things we can do. But certainly if you want to send a copy of the draft you're working on occasionally to the planning board, that's fine, but we really can't take not much we can do about it until we get it. And we can't change it anyway, as you know, once it hits us. So yeah, that's fine.
Jerry, may I say something else?
Absolutely.
Yeah, the point is to communicate well, right? Initially, when you guys started working on this, to remind people who may not have been in on this, Jerry and I and Alfred were all on the planning board when we did the AADU. And there were things in it that I felt needed more attention, but in any case, it got passed at town meeting. I want to remind everybody about something I said that we're all aware of at another meeting. The management of the AADU has not been good. It's an administrative dysfunction. It has nothing to do with the basic aspects of that bylaw, some of which should be tweaked. I agree with that. But whatever is in there or not, however it's managed or not, does not address the situation we have, which Michael DeVasto touched on, that most of us are very aware of, which is the housing situation has really changed, and it has really, really changed in the last year. And while I can see pros and cons for having an ADU bylaw by right, very carefully done with all the changes that need to happen in the zoning bylaws to address those changes, David Rowell, I think that it's yet another option. It won't be usable all over town, and it will provide another way to address this really weird situation we're in. Because what we don't need necessarily is more housing. We need more housing that people can afford. I also want to give you a heads up. about something else that's happening, which is I'm once again bringing up, and I've got an agenda item scheduled on the next Shellfish Advisory Board meeting, where something I started drafting years ago, which is to have a very careful way in which you can, for maybe a short period of time, I need to hear what the Shellfish Committee hears about this. So this is just me bringing something up again for, by the way, the fourth time. Housing is impossible here. You cannot have a commercial permit or hold a lease to farm in this town unless you're domiciled. I was one of the people that worked very hard on a definition of domicile. I think that there should be a very carefully worded, very strict exception to that if you lose your housing in Wellfleet for reasons not in your control. And I'm working on that too. And once again, I have a date on the next agenda. I made it with the chair of the Shellfish Advisory last month. And this is not unrelated to what you're working on, which is why I'm mentioning it. We need to address this. Beth is right. And we're not going to address it in any way that solves it across the board. We're going to do it a little bit here, a little bit there, but let's make sure the language is good and can be applied very clearly. Thank you.
Thank you.
There's a situation, Helen, where because of the need, we have to look outside the box. So yes. All right.
You
Anything
have
else?
still Sharon waiting to talk.
Oh, I'm sorry, Sharon.
I got you, Sharon.
Get myself here.
Yeah,
Okay.
I see you.
Okay, so, I've listened and listened. And we have been working on this ADU proposal since before Christmas last year. And, I hear all of the problems with it and I understand them. And yet I know that many towns, although the situations are different, many towns on the Cape have passed working ADU bylaws that have gotten past the Attorney General. And I think that there's enough large lots in Wellfleet that it's worth going ahead. And I think that it's time for us to move forward with it. So I am still in favor of a petitioned article, and with Helen and Elaine and myself, and we do have experts lined up to help us to really look it over, and we will come back to you. We very much appreciate the time that you've put into this and your many offers, your many suggestions that maybe we would want to go with petitioned article. If it causes problems in the future with the codification and those issues, then maybe in the future, we'll come back and write another bylaw, or you will. And we'll support you. But I think right now it's time to move forward. We've talked a lot.
Okay. Yeah, I'm going to take your advice. I think at this point, you've heard from Sharon. We haven't heard from Elaine, but I'm sure Elaine is parallel to both Sharon and Helen. I don't feel that we should hit this on two fronts. So planning board members, based on the fact, and probably Olga is going to jump in with and give them help or decide not to. That's her sole discretion as whether she does or not, what she does on her free time. Based on the fact that we have heard clearly that we have a group that is going to be working on a petitioned article for ADUs. Is it the board's feeling that we should continue our discussions along a different line, or should we step back and say, all right, it's going to hit us when it's complete. If they want to give us a draft here and there, fine, but it's really, we're really not in a position to really negotiate or talk with that. It's really what they present. I think those are the two avenues the board has got to go with. Either proceed with concurrent bylaw or step back and let them do it. So I'm going to open that up, and I see Beth's hand, so,
I'm gonna make a motion, Jerry.
okay?
Go slow, Beth, so I can write it down.
Okay. And correct me if I need correction.
I just listened to it back just so I make sure it's right before I actually write it, but as long as you're slow, go.
Okay, I move that the planning board respond to a proposal for ADU policy for town meeting. Respond to it officially at town meeting.
Okay, Beth, before anybody seconds that,
Yeah.
Clean it up.
well, wait a minute, I get this. We have to respond to it, but I can't really even go there. I've got to see if there's a second. Is there a second on that from anybody? Okay, there isn't any, so it doesn't pass.
Okay,
Beth, we as a planning board, either you as individual members or myself appointed as chair to speak at town meeting, and you guys can as well. I have to read the report that we have when we have the open hearing, public hearing on the petitioned article and the reasons why we either approved or disapproved or no decision at all. So we do voice our opinion at town meeting on that. So I don't know, I wasn't sure where you were going.
so where I'm going is that we delegate,
We can't delegate anybody.
not the right word,
No.
we abdicate,
Word, I think.
we abdicate. So, okay, let me start again.
You want to drop the ball and
Want to
you're either
move
going
that
to,
the planning board does not present a policy on ADU or AADU at town meeting, but will respond to any independent proposals regarding that.
Much better. Much,
Okay. See, I'm learning. I'm still learning.
it's okay. It's a learning process for all of us. Any second on that? I
Could
see
you
no
repeat
second.
it? Could you repeat the exact wording?
Exactly. Okay.
Rebecca?
Rebecca,
I didn't write it down. You stopped
Okay.
talking.
All right, so let's do it again. I propose that the planning board does not present an article of AADU or ADU at town meeting, but reserves its right to support or not support any other proposal presented
at town meeting.
at town meeting.
Okay, so the gist of what she's saying is she's recommending that the planning board not continue on a path of a bylaw, let the affordable
Petition
housing
article play out.
and we will have a hearing on it and then make our recommendation on town meeting floor. So
Correct.
she's
Fair
saying
enough.
take a back seat.
Thank you,
That's
Jerry.
That's basically the motion.
Thank you.
Any member of the planning board want to second that? What?
I'll second it.
Okay, David seconded it. Now it's open for discussion. Because
Well, I have Michael DeVasco's hand up and Helen Miranda Wilson's hand up.
Oh, no, how is this now?
before I get into that, it's on the planning board right now as to
The planning board
them first, yes.
members.
My hand's not up. I just forgot to lower it. Sorry.
Me too, me too.
Okay, I'm gonna just hit it. Olga. I'm gonna let you finish what you
I
got in your
was
mouth.
just unmuting myself, but I didn't mean to put my hand up. But since you called on me,
No,
it
I'm just gonna
sounds-
go down and say,
Oh, oh.
okay, you got any input? It's been
it
moved.
sounds
and
like
seconded.
it sounds like this motion is exactly the procedure. So I don't want to deal with it. I would just abstain or vote against it. I don't see the difference between this motion and the fact that if there's a petitioned article, we have a hearing, we, put our, we talk about it, but we vote it up or down.
So the difference is it's been on our agenda. How do we get it off our agenda
I
legitimately?
just take it off.
Just take
I
it
just
off.
Literally take it off.
Just take it off?
I mean, it would be nice to have a vote to say that the planning board votes to take it off the agenda. And you could state, based on the fact there's a petitioned article being worked on that we feel is,
Right.
we don't want to have a conflict. So that could easily go into the minutes that way, and that would be the end of the discussion. You could also have your motion seconded and say, okay, that's basically a way to do it. The only problem with that
Oh, God.
is, the only thing I didn't like about it, and I'm sorry I didn't go to David Mead, but just to jump in, is the way you worded it, that we will have no discussion on ADU or ADU at all. I feel a little uncomfortable on that aspect. I'd rather just take it off the table, and if necessary, if the affordable housing group comes back to us 3 meetings from now and had a question, we're already on record with a vote saying we're not being involved with anything to do with ADU or AADU. I'd rather leave that open.
Fair
But
enough. Yeah.
You know what so
Yeah.
with that said, I think Olga has basically said she's going to vote against it. David Mead,
I'd rather leave it open as well.
okay. Beth. I'm sorry, Bonnie.
Yeah, I mean, I would feel more comfortable with a motion that makes it explicit that we would be happy to comment on the citizen draft before they submit the final one to town meeting, just
Problem
to.
with that is what if they don't?
Yeah, most of the time.
No, I think I'd just say we're willing to. It doesn't mean that they have to. I don't want to.
Bonnie, most of the time, we do not take a position on a petitioned article without a public hearing for input. That's why it's a petitioned article. It's taken out of the process of the planning board and made a petitioned article. Now, we have done it because, as a matter of fact, Michael, a couple of years ago, was working on a bylaw. Planning board was working on a bylaw. We knew he was working on a petition bylaw and subsequently submitted one. So we did comment on it when we were asked, but I don't know if I'd rather see us just table the discussion. And if a question comes up and I need to put it on the agenda, put it on the agenda, rather than say we're not going to talk about it at all. I'd rather leave it open. But, so far, Olga's voted against it. David's voted against it. It's up to you. I'm going to probably vote against it. So we've already got, looks like 3. So you tell me what you want to do here.
So now I'm confused about what voting against it means.
Voting against it means that the article loses, and that if in fact it's necessary, we can discuss ADU or AADU at a meeting. The way Beth has got it, we've taken it off the table for any discussion.
Oh, yeah, I wouldn't want to do that.
Okay, then you would vote no.
Yeah.
And that's the way I'm reading your motion, Beth.
So that wasn't exactly my intention. My intention was that we will not continue to work to develop a policy. We
Okay,
will respond to a policy. That doesn't mean we can't discuss it, but,
that's not what you said, though. So,
okay, I get that. So let's vote down the
either that or you can,
motion.
either that or David can rescind his second and you can rescind your first.
I can rescind,
No,
I
let's
can
vote
rescind
down
my
the motion.
second, yeah.
Let's vote down the motion.
Okay. At this point, I think we got, all the members involved, all members, if you're in favor of the motion, signify by saying aye and raising your hand. None. All those opposed?
Aye.
Okay. Beth, if you want to discuss it and not discuss, if you want to discuss AADU or ADU at a meeting, but you don't want to go forward with a parallel zoning bylaw and let the petition people go ahead with it, you don't have to do anything. No motion is really necessary at this point. I just take it off the table.
I make
and
no
off
motion.
Okay,
And then
If that's
it stays on the plate, but by
Exactly.
staying on the plate, so my real point was that we shouldn't be attending to creating a policy.
Right.
That was my intention, was the planning board accepts that we are not committed to creating an ADU, AADU policy.
Okay, will you do me a great favor?
That's all.
Will you put in your quiver of explanations? We don't make policy, we make zoning bylaws.
Bylaws.
So you're getting
Bylaws.
me a
That's
little
all.
confused.
No,
I know
So
it's simple.
that's school committee stuff. Policy is school committee stuff. I'm talking bylaws.
Thank
Sorry.
you. It helps me out tremendously.
Replace policy with bylaw.
Good girl. Thank you.
Thank you, Rebecca.
All right, so
You're
That's
very
all.
welcome. I'm gonna have to
Over
listen to
with.
that 4 or 5 times, but you're welcome.
Call me if you need me.
I will.
Okay. Planning board members. Second thing on the agenda at 9 o'clock, and I thought we were gonna get this through earlier. We really didn't do anything on a bylaw or discussion on whether or not to do a bylaw on lot clearing. I know Beth had some questions on it. Goodbye, everybody. And I could see, I see your point, Beth. I think what the bylaw basically said is no construction or site preparation work can be done without getting a permit or all necessary permits that were necessary to be like a building permit on a single family residence. Anything under 4 inches or less. And I got the indication from board members anyway, that they were kind of against it. And it seemed too restrictive that if somebody needed to take down a couple trees, that they'd have to go to notify the building inspector. Well, if it's greater than 4 inches and it's dead, I think you just notify them and that's it. If overall it seems to be a stumbling block, would it be better to say, okay, let's restrict this to routes, anything on bordering Route 6 or commercial district? I think you all see what can happen when someone doesn't follow the rules. And that's the only time this becomes an issue, is when people don't follow the rules. This situation could have happened on a residential lot neighbors could have been upset, but there would have been no stop order unless something like this article was passed. In the particular case that we're talking on Route 6, where there's a 35-foot buffer, no matter whether it's by right or anything else, that triggered the
What's
problem.
that? Cool.
So,
Nice.
where would the board like to go? What are your thoughts?
I apologize for missing the last meeting where we talked about this, so I'm in the
Oh, I'm
dark.
sorry, David. I'll try and make it real quick.
Okay.
Paul, did you get the letter in your last packet that you weren't here?
Yeah.
Where building inspector submitted a bylaw that Dennis has that basically no construction or site preparation work shall be done on any land, including the removal of trees greater than 4 inches.
A tree greater than 4 inches, singular.
Right.
One tree,
Per tree.
One tree.
right.
Anything over 4 inches, or more than 10% of the vegetation without the necessary permits in place.
And the
So,
permits being permits to do whatever they plan to do with the property?
well,
No, well,
No,
in the case
permits
of,
to remove trees.
to remove trees, so in the case of,
Okay.
in the case of a residential lot, for example, someone could go in and take 3.5-inch trees and 10% of the vegetation and not pull a building permit and be no problem. If they were gonna go in and build a house, they could go in and send in the excavator to do the septic tests and everything like that. Surveyors could cut a tree down if necessary to do the lot lines. However, before they started taking trees of 4 inches or more down, they would simply have to have the building permit issued. That's notification to the abutters what's happening.
Right.
It's
right.
not getting permission from the building inspector to take down any trees. It's a matter of you can't take these trees down of 4 inches or greater without having, on a residential lot, a building permit.
That,
but
So,
if you're in
on a
a,
house, didn't mean to catch off, David. So if you've got a house that's already built and you already have your driveway in and you've already got landscaping, but you want to take down
a
bunch of
tree,
for something else and it needs a permit, you would have to get the permit first. If it doesn't need a permit, but you just want to clear the lot, you want to clear your setbacks. Because the house is already built, you'd probably have to get a permit from the building inspector to have them say, okay, fine.
which is going to be a problem because any tree over 4 inches, whether there's a house there or not, you have to get a permit for. And so I could just go in and say, okay, well, it's landscaping. And that's one of the specific things you don't need a permit for is landscaping. So there again, we're creating this in a vacuum, not looking at other laws, and largely responding to the pitchfork crowd, which I'm sympathetic to. But the asshole involved in this damn knew what he was doing, and he did violate it. So
Okay.
this law isn't necessarily an answer to it.
Yeah, I don't think that just because we have an example from Dennis, that's the whole story. Obviously, to me, I actually believe it's a very important topic that we could talk about. And again, sorry I missed the other conversation, but I don't see why our standard should be, are we going to adopt exactly what Dennis did or nothing? I think that it's important to try to figure this out, leaving aside Route 6 for how we might want to, maybe we'll say no, how we might want to deal with the issue of tree cutting on residential lots as well as commercial in the town of Wellfleet. This seems like a reasonable topic.
I agree.
I agree with that, David. I think you're right. Yeah, yeah.
Right, and then,
It's a reasonable topic. Yeah.
and that's all I'm trying to get. This was just an example. There's all kinds of ones out there.
Right.
It's a matter of whether planning board wanted to proceed with something of this nature, or did you want to drop it? That's
Well,
the
I
whole.
would be in favor of proceeding with something of this nature, addressing the topic. What we
Okay.
come out with, I don't know what we'd come out with, but I'd be in favor. I think we'd be doing the town a service if we tackle this. And it's hard and it's complicated, but it could be very beneficial.
Well, we already do have that same similar bylaw in the National Seashore.
Right, right.
Olga, any thoughts? Okay. Beth?
Helen has her hand up
I
again.
totally agree with David.
Okay.
Totally.
Helen, before I go, let me just kind of run through. David? Raul,
David Rao.
Yeah.
you okay with discussing it in general?
Oh yeah, no. I think it's a gray area, but it totally needs to perhaps be looked at because there's a plethora of solutions or no solutions. So, but we should look at it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Bonnie?
Yeah, I would like to discuss it. I would like to
Okay.
discuss it and with the idea of possibly improving on any other bylaws we know about or our current ones.
Alfred?
Well, I have two opinions on this. I mean, we have another lot on Route 6 that doesn't have any trees on it. It's used as a farm. It's never had any controversy with it. So, I mean, I think that I'm certainly not opposed to talking about something, but I think that we can't take one bad apple and use that as our whole program. I mean, there's I mean, and I think that, I guess my question really is there are rules for a particular lot, and they need to be held accountable for that so that it doesn't keep going the way it is. But I mean, in the meantime, I'd be happy to discuss it. But I want to be very clear that some lots that don't have any trees on them aren't totally, I don't want to say tasteless, but I mean, for what they use.
They're agriculture. Yeah, they're for agriculture.
Right.
I mean, there's one right on Route 6, and I'm not going to say his name, but I mean, he grows sunflowers and all kinds of stuff there, and people stop and buy them, and I mean, it's part of
So
part of our community.
individualized. It's an individualized system.
Yeah,
Yes, I mean, and I want to be very,
Individual.
I
you
totally
know-
understand because I got alpacas and they don't have any trees.
I'm just trying to say that on
Yeah.
Route 6, we've had lots cleared exactly to the same extent, because there's some taste left into it, versus knowing I can do it quickly and get away with it and hope for forgiveness. That's the difference in what the people who have lived in this town have done.
No, but so Alfred, it's about the purpose of the clearing. It's really about the purpose and what
Oh,
the
I-
land is being used for, right?
I don't disagree, but I'm just saying that sometimes we have to look back at the community and the people who are in it.
Yeah, sure.
Bonnie?
Yeah, for some reason, I don't have the hand raising feature that gives you the little thing.
No, I
on
saw
my-
your hand.
You do. You just have to go down and look under the reactions. If you hit reactions,
Where
it's
do
down on the
I
screen.
can't even find reactions.
If you move your
Oh,
mouse,
reactions.
yep, hit it.
Oh, I was looking for.
It has all these reactions you can have, but then you want to hit the raise hand.
No, I can give somebody a heart. Okay. No, what I wanted to say is that my understand, and maybe I'm just misinterpreting this conversation, but my understanding is that the instance that raised all the controversy was an instance where people disobeyed our existing bylaws. And,
Correct.
and so it seems to me it's probably not in I don't know if it's in the planning board's purview to recommend that such instances have more significant penalties.
No.
I just don't know what.
No, that's the building, Bonnie, that will fall that will fall to the building inspector. And in this case, I cannot speak and would never speak for a building inspector, but the way it read is that particular property had a 35-foot buffer because it bordered Route 6. That buffer was taken down. So whether or not they do something by right, or whether or not they do it under a special permit, that 35-foot buffer is going to have to be probably revegetated and replanted.
And I was saying that
That's the cost of doing business when you don't read the zoning bylaw.
I was saying that I think this is a topic that's worthy of us to discuss, even if that had not happened on Route 6.
Yes,
That's what I'm saying.
right. Helen, did you have your hand up? Somebody said,
Mike and Helen both have their
oh,
hands
Mike,
up.
okay.
Yeah, a couple things. I want to ask everybody, nobody acknowledged it, that's fine, although I could get huffy about that. During your last meeting, I sent you all state law about cutting down trees and clearing land. And I also, I think, sent you what we have here, I think is a general bylaw, which is if you want to cut something down within, is it 10 feet of a town way, you have to go to the DPW. Now, within the DPW, you have a tree warden. That's where our tree warden is now. My neighbor, Kenny Rose, used to be the tree warden. Now it's someone in the DPW, maybe the director.
Yes, it is.
I think you need to get that in the zoning bylaw. And here's what I, as a person who lives here and really cares about trees, beg of you all as an individual at my sole discretion. First of all, I would like at least some of you to read the science about trees and what it does to the atmosphere. It's huge. There's a lot of science. It's real. The second thing is, and there's all kinds of science about it. You can read what a pine tree does. You can read depending on size, depending on season. Also, be really familiar with the state laws because we don't want to be out of sync with them, and make it so that the DPW understands all of this before they say, oh yes, fine. It's fine if you cut down that huge shade tree in the parking lot at Town Hall. I love the people that run hatches, but it was well within 10 feet of a public way, namely the parking lot, which is town owned. And they should have asked the DPW, even though it was, the base of it was on their property. They could have gotten an easement. Never mind. I love that business. But what I'm saying here is this has come into a new place in the last decade because of what we know about trees. And if you draft a bylaw about this or put an amendment into one of the existing bylaws, I suggest that you also, as you have to do or can do about drainage in, let's say, a subdivision you put in, you have, and it's something the state asked for. We did a workshop on it once. You work with the Conservation Commission. I think this is an overlap issue, cutting down trees. And there are a lot of different places where there are restrictions of doing it. And I beg you to be aware of all of them before you start drafting something. Thank you.
Michael?
Yeah, I was just wondering, it's kind of been, I guess I'm just looking for some clarity. It's been kind of tossed around that either, I guess the first question I have is, when it defines that buffer, does it define that the buffer has to be consisting of existing vegetation? Or can the buffer be in a site plan with landscaped vegetation currently? And then I guess, so if it's clear that the rules were violated, then I'm wondering the need to rewrite rules if the problem was that somebody violated the rules that already existed, or is the town or the planning board saying that when you clear a lot on the highway, you have to leave the existing vegetation. You can't take that vegetation down and replace it with landscaped vegetation to create that buffer. And that wasn't clear to me in the bylaw that it needed to be existing vegetation. You couldn't cut it and replace it. So those are my questions, and just looking for a little clarity on whether they actually violated something that they needed a permit for now, or not, because I feel like that's not quite clear either, as far as the quarrying issue, because my understanding was that was about harvesting or extracting soil, sand, or clay, or rock, and moving it onto another site or selling it, is what the definition is there. So I guess I'm unsure whether there was actually rules broken or there's a need for new rules to sort of consist with what Wellfleet actually wants in their bylaws. So just for me and maybe the audience, a little bit of clarity on what it actually says, what the violation may have been, and
I gotta make it a generality, number one.
sure.
Number two, it's a kind of a compound situation. So I'm gonna speak in general as much as I can. Route 6 commercial property has a 35-foot buffer from the lot line, not from the road layout or the pavement, but from the layout. So that layout many times is 10 feet off the pavement, and then you start your ownership 35 feet in from Route 6 only. There is in fact a buffer that says you can't take down more than, I think it's 10%. Here's the compounding problem, Michael. If you've got something that's by right, you don't go to anybody. You have to read that bylaw, and then you proceed to do whatever you're doing by right, but you read the bylaw and says you've got to retain 35 feet. If in fact a special permit is required, under the special permit process, the Board of Appeals has the right to waive that 35 feet and come to an agreement with the applicant, depending on the use and other things, to say, okay, we'll allow you to take down 25%, or we'll allow you to take down X because of your curb cut, but you're going to replant it, revegetate it, and do X, Y, and Z. So yes, to answer your question, there are two kind of things. There's by right, which is almost like a no touch. And then there's a special permit where the Board of Appeals would make the decision on what you take down and don't take down. But that 35 feet is supposed to be a no touch unless special permit grants you alternatives.
Oh, so is all
You up?
existing, it has to be left existing vegetation. Can't be taken down and turned and re-landscaped into a 35-foot buffer as desired landscape wise. I just,
If it's by right, if the use is by right. So if for example, on
currently,
a commercial piece of property, you can go in and build a single family residence by right.
yeah,
Permitted use.
right,
You don't go to the Board of Appeals.
right.
If you have a curb cut off of Route 6, of course, that curb cut can be cleared. You have a curb cut into your property. The other 35% depth, or 35 feet, can't be touched.
Okay,
It can be I thought I could put my finger on it real. quick.
Are you in the general bylaws,
No, I'm
Jerry?
I'm in the zoning bylaws.
Okay.
Um,
Um, okay.
Gary, are you in the landscaping section?
it could be in landscaping.
Uh, 6.12.1 perimeter.
Yes.
No, no, no.
Page.
Yeah, I think that's what it is. Page 38
Yep, that's what I read earlier today.
at the bottom.
Parking areas for 10 or more cars, outdoor storage areas, loading facilities, or similar service areas shall be separated from Route 6 right of way by at least 35 feet from all property lines. So all of that's got to be set back. There's also in perimeter, there's someplace else in the special permit, Michael, that says that 35 feet it doesn't have to be necessarily left in its entire state, but the Board of Appeals has the jurisdiction to say, okay, you can take down the trees, but you're gonna plant, like the landscaping company ended up doing next to the old Cape Cod real estate. That was all treed.
Yeah.
They came in, grassed it, but then they planted crabapple trees or something else.
Yeah,
But
that's what I was wondering.
Yeah, so if it's retail trade, you need the visibility from Route 6 to see it. So the Board of Appeals has the right to say, okay, you're gonna do something else in that 35 feet to revegetate. But we understand that you also have to be able to see the property of what's there because it's retail. On the flip side, if it was going to be a parking or terminal or anything of that nature, they're probably not gonna grant it. They're probably gonna say, no, we want it thick and heavy and leave it be.
But a
So yes,
contractor,
we have a zoning bylaw that I feel was, in a particular case, driving it wasn't mentioned in the cease and desist, but it certainly was there. He just wanted to get the cease and desist out. I think what we're doing is saying, okay, should we look at does this raise a question as to whether the planning board should look at the entire town again to say, all right, vegetation is important and that we may or may not need to put some guidelines in. I think that's where we went tonight, but there were some laws that were broken on the other side, yes. I hope
Sure.
that answered your question.
I still don't see anywhere where it says it needs to be existing vegetation. I think that's what I'm wondering about, but maybe you're saying that.
I'll tell you what, I will dig into it and I'll let you know.
That's fine. I don't want to take up more time. on
I
you.
found it at some point, okay?
Okay, that's fine. I just wanted to clarify it for the town so they understand what was.
And I'll see if I can't clarify it for you for the town.
Okay, thank you, Jerry.
You're welcome. Board members, anybody else? So we've decided basically to look at lot clearing
Yep.
in the future. All right, I'll get that on the next agenda.
Yep.
Kathleen, was there anything you all said or just moving something? Okay. Minutes? Anyone got any changes on minutes?
I made some changes that Olga sent to me. Other than that, I think they're okay.
Were the changes substantial?
No, they weren't substantial, just a few different things that I just needed to fix, but no, not substantial.
Okay, dotting i's, crossing t's, commas?
Yes, exactly.
No intent.
No, she was great. She just, she sends what she finds a little bit, I mess up a few things, she sends it to me, I fix it, we're good to go.
I have no problem.
I
with it.
appreciate it.
I have no problem with her changes. It's just a matter of if all of a sudden any member.
No
is
no
changing
words were
intent,
changed, no
then we really
discussion
need to
was
go over it.
Yep, no discussion or anything was changed as far as I understand from her email.
All right, based on that, any motion for,
Right.
Olga?
I would, one of the things that I wrote about was, I had said, I had a question on recorded restriction, not on deed restriction for AADUs. And in the meantime, I think you got an email from Danny O'Connell saying there is no deed restriction on AADUs. And I don't want to correct the minutes because that's what you said, but I think I'd like it to be clear that AADUs do not have deed restrictions since
Well,
2003.
I gotta disagree with Denny a little bit, and Alfred can certainly jump in here. Because I think he's had an AADU.
They're all recorded at the registry. That's a recorded deed
What we got
restriction.
is, you have,
Mine isn't.
okay, you have, wait a minute,
Then you didn't record it.
you have a deed to your property.
Mhm.
Com Electric, Eversource, any rights, any easements usually are written in that deed.
Right.
Okay, that's recorded at the registry. When you go for a special permit, the special permit granting authority, in this case, we'll just say Board of Appeals, will grant you a special permit to do something. And they will write an order of conditions.
Right.
That approval, along with the order of conditions, is required by the Board of Appeals to be recorded at the Registry of Deeds as a document against your deed.
Mm-hmm.
So it may not be within the deed, but it is a recorded restriction on your property. So when an attorney
Gary,
goes,
can I
but
gotta interject
Yep.
that onus is solely on the petitioner. And the town, the only way the town can verify that is if the petitioner has recorded that deed with the decision from the ZBA and comes back with an attested wet copy from the board, from the Registry of Deeds. Otherwise, Olga, yours isn't recorded because you never recorded it. The town does not record it for you.
Yeah, but David, she
Yeah.
should not have been issued a building permit of any kind of sort without the
But
book
that's
and
what we
page.
did in P-Town, because we wouldn't issue a building permit unless
I
we
don't-
had the recorded decision from the ZBA in our little wet little hands.
Can
But
we
we've
make this
never
more
done that in
general?
Wellfleet.
I'm sorry?
Can we make this more general so it's not specific to a person?
Yeah, it's in general, the Board of
Any
Appeals,
special permit.
any special permit is just like anything from the Board of Health. Board of Health says, you have
want a
food
restaurant
permit
license.
permit. You're gonna have to record that at the Registry of Deeds as a document, and when an attorney goes to search your title, they're gonna find your deed and they're gonna find the document. Now, in this case,
If
in this
But
case,
this-
I think in some cases, all right, Beth, I will.
Helen has her hand up.
Talk about this case.
Hold on.
Or
Hold on.
your agenda.
In the general case,
On your agenda.
is the applicant under the Board of Appeals has always been instructed to have it recorded and then send it back with a date and stamp on the recorded on a copy of the recorded document to the Board of Appeals and put in file so they know it was done. I understand the water department in the town of Wellfleet, when you put on a water restriction or anything of that nature, they go up and they physically record it. So, you know, what happened, and now to David Rao's point, some applicants, I'm following Beth's lead here, some applicants do not, simply because they didn't understand or they didn't have an attorney,
Or they didn't care to,
didn't
whatever.
Didn't
choice.
record it.
Didn't record it.
Yeah, but Jerry,
Yes.
you cannot get a building permit for something that is not by right unless you have a book and page where you put it on your deed with the order of conditions from whatever board it came from. So the applicant would have been turned down at the building window unless they produced that filing.
But Alfred, the building department's never required a recorded certified copy. All they've gone by is the decision of the ZBA that the decision has been made, but they've never verified that decision had been recorded.
Oh, I'll disagree, David. I know I've taken them.
I totally disagree. No, they don't verify
I've
that
taken
it's
them.
been recorded.
All right,
Well,
guys.
you've taken them because you know better.
All right, guys, this is not on the agenda, but to clarify the minutes.
Can I say one other thing about the deed, Jerry?
Yeah,
A lot of housing things, and maybe there's some confusion here. Some housing stuff, Wellfleet did it through a special permit, so it could evaporate, or you could take it off. Most times when you get an affordable unit, so that you can't just take the stove out like Wellfleet does, it's in perpetuity. So once you build that structure, you can never change it. It stays in the deed. So I don't know if there's confusion for Olga in that state. If this was in a different place, and she got I got an affordable accessory, and it was done through perpetuity, that unit, even if I took the stove out of it, could not be used for anything but affordable. I don't know if there's some concern about the language in that.
right. So if consequently, if it's a special permit, you can rescind the special permit by not fulfilling, by not using it for 2 years, it goes blank, and then you just put on a document that says, okay, it's
I
withdrawn.
withdraw.
Clears the title, but
So-
no, it is a document.
So Jerry, I'm totally ignorant. I have a friend,
You're ignorant in some things, but certainly not in others.
I had a friend
Oh, did I put that wrong? Damn, I'm sorry.
who rented an apartment.
Yep.
From someone who owns a house. And she lived there for a year without a stove.
Yeah.
And she said to me, I can't cook. I can't stay here because I can't cook. So the fact of not putting in a stove or taking out a stove redefines that space.
Redefines, yes, it redefines the fact that that is a single-family dwelling. And now
Exactly.
now it simply comes back to, if in fact the Title V regulations were followed to the letter of the law, and the 1 bedroom or the 2 bedrooms that were put in there were by code.
It's
Then
another way
The single
of
family,
avoiding.
the single family designation comes out. So it's no longer a single family dwelling. However, the 2 bedrooms and the bathroom and the kitchenette
Are we having this?
is still legal. You can't.
Don't we call
use
that a
the bedroom.
studio?
Huh?
Don't we call that a studio in our zoning book?
We call that a studio. You can't lose the bedrooms once you've gone through Title V and made them legal.
Studio doesn't count as living space. You can't sleep there.
You got it.
I'm not so
No,
sure
so-
that I don't believe that's going to hold up in court.
No.
Well, we got to have
No one's taking
that'll
it
play
for-
out.
You can
That's the
have an outbuilding. I mean, in the older, I'm dating myself, but back in the 70s when I first came here in 75, but prior to that, a lot of the contemporaries that were built with a bedroom and a bathroom and a kitchen facility and maybe 2 bedrooms in a main house, and then 5 feet or 10 feet, 20 feet, they had a deck, and then all of a sudden they had a bunkhouse with 2 bedrooms, which was detached. That's the way they wanted to live. They wanted their kids were old enough, they lived in the bunkhouse, and the parents didn't want them above them, so that's what they built and they're perfectly legal all over town. Same
Are you
exact
still
premise.
discussing my minutes? I'm just
Yeah,
wondering.
I
I
think
know,
that,
this is
We're
very,
going
this-
back.
Discuss it.
We're going back.
yeah, it's, I'll gladly put
We're
it on
not
the
going-
agenda
All
next time.
related.
I'll gladly put it on the
All
agenda next
related.
time, Olga, if you want to further discuss it.
Do we ever, can I call a question on the minutes, or do we actually get that far?
I was,
No, we accepted the minutes.
No,
Just
we
as amended. They haven't accepted. I just said that I amended what Olga wrote because she is very good at giving me notes.
who
I move
moved
the
it?
minutes. I move the minutes.
Any
If somebody
second?
hasn't.
I second.
I saw Beth first. Moved and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
I-
All right, I'll put that on the agenda just possibly to discuss next meeting and see if we can't help clear up the problem a little
Yeah.
bit more, but that's basically it.
I just want to say, Jerry, I'm so happy we're meeting. I know it's Zoom, it's not the best, whatever, but I'm so happy to be back.
Don't be mad at me.
Good.
in
Me too.
planning.
Hopefully we'll be meeting
Thank you,
in a live place at some point.
at some
soon,
point.
but, you know, it's, so long as we're all healthy, we can put up with almost anything else.
And most of us are now eligible to be vaccinated.
Yeah, I just got it today.
Tomorrow
Excuse
it
me?
opens up.
Oh,
Just got permission. Well, I didn't get it yet, but at least I'm in that realm.
You're eligible.
I got you,
I'm eligible.
Opie. I've been
Yourself.
sterilized.
I missed the other one by 2 years. All right,
For yourselves.
can we adjourn?
So your next meeting is March 3rd.
Okay, anybody have a conflict or problem? Okay, seeing none. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.